think we're good. So yeah, we'll troubleshoot things as they happen, I think. So let me ask chat if they're listening to us fine. So bye, Danny. So I was telling Steven that Danny's not going to be able to be with us today. She's a little under the weather, but she's still going to work on a bunch of things that we have to do for our book. So she's awesome. She's always working. So thank you, Danny. But let's see if people, because I had a bunch of people waiting here. Hey, Liad, how you doing? Liad, let me know if you can hear us both fine. Hello, Steven. They're saying, oh my God, Elpis Space is saying. Sounds good. Okay, there we go. Sounds good.
Hi, chat. I hope my audio sounds good too. If I'm too much more quiet or too much more loud at any point, just let me know.
Dude, I think for me, you're perfect. So that's awesome. So let's do Steven. Is it Steven, Steve?
I'm fine with either. My wife prefers Steven. She's always like, his name is Steven. And I'm always like, I'm Steve or Steven.
I'm going to go with your wife then, Steven. So for people that don't know, Steven did what I think it's a really awesome video on problems that I wasn't even thinking about when I was contemplating pretty much just enjoying, just making a bunch of AI vomit art. And I'm really thankful that you delved into a bunch of things that I just wasn't aware of, and coming to it from an angle that that it's probably different from the one I'm coming from, because, we're both artists, but we both come from different places. And I guess we just, bring our own experiences into it. So I'm hoping that we can kind of, I don't know if come to a midpoint. I don't even know where what my stand is on this. I just like to question stuff. And hopefully, today I can just, throw a lot of questions at you, and we can just try to make sense about something that is pretty difficult to make sense right now. So I would advise people that if you haven't watched Steven's video, please, check it out after this live and check out Steven's work. I think we left a couple of links in the description of the video below, so you guys can check those out after the video. And Steven is an illustrator. I was looking at the clients that you've worked for, and it's pretty much everyone, I would say. Yeah, all big clients. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. All big clients. I'm guessing pre-production work, is it? Character design and that sort. And you've also taught for a bunch of years. So I think in that sense, we've kind of have like a similar life/professional experience, which I've done it with painting, but I taught for like 12 years at a visual arts faculty. And now I'm doing workshops, and we're doing streams, and so there's a lot of like what a current artist is doing nowadays, which is just trying to keep up with like all these manners that we are using nowadays to socialize like what we do. Yeah. So I wanted to start, Steven, by kind of describing to you how I understood, like if I take a step back, how I understood, the questions that you were posing about AI. And you can correct me, and please correct me if I misinterpreted something, if I misremembered something, or if I'm just wrong about something. Like, please step in and just correct me. And I'm going to describe how I saw it, and, I'm going to kind of ask you a question after that, and then we can just get started. So,
yeah, no problem.
Awesome. So I think when I saw the video, like we were pausing it and discussing it with Danny, it was pretty cool. But
I love that. That's great.
No, it was pretty cool. So it was like literally, in bed, turn the TV on, watch the video, pause it like every 5 minutes, and we had like a small discussion, and then like play and discuss. But I would say that they're like, bigger strokes, like broader strokes. You're talking about two main things, which is one is like the business model, like let's say very much, and unfortunately, it echoes many of the things that happen with like the bigger art world. It's an unregulated business model, or it poses to be an unregulated business model in the sense that there's no clear legislation right now. I was looking at a bunch of stuff about this, and there's no clear laws outside those of fair use, of copyright and fair use and public domain, let's say. But aside from that, there's no like teeth. There's nothing that we could really say, oh my God, this business model, is illegal. If something is illegal, it's easier to say, wow, the law should just go down on them and say, hey, stop it. Like, absolutely stop this and just squash this. But I think that you were quite intelligently saying, like, this is like an, ethics problem. This is unethical. Like, this is not, and I think you repeated unethical quite a bit, because it kind of falls into that moral space where we're like, hey, these are guidelines that we want to use as people so that we know when something is not right and when something is right. Yeah. But unfortunately, with these bigger data centers, what are they called? I'm sorry, the name escapes me. Like the data centers, the data collection centers that they are then feeding into their algorithm.
The ones that I use as examples mainly are Lion, which has multiple offerings. There's Lion 5B, Lion 2B, Lion 450 mil, 400 mil, I believe it is. They have multiple offerings of data sets that are going for different things, using different volumes. There's quite a lot in there. And even that is not so clear cut, because Lion is almost a way to aggregate rawly collected image data that is collected by another nonprofit called Common Crawl. So those are the two that I mention in the video. But depending on how these things shake out, depending on what we set precedent for, what is seen to be legal and things like that, there will be more, and they will come in different shapes and forms. So,
right. And it sounds like offshore accounts that are meant to like hide money. Like, it seems like this thing is just going to spread and spread and spread. And right now, when things are not regulated, it's very dire, because you kind of have a feeling that it may not be easy to stop once it's set in motion. Because I think and I guess we could talk about this, or let's I guess we could talk about this. You pose their stand, like, these companies holding like a different stand when it comes to like music, for example. And and I was thinking a little bit about this, and I would say, I wish we could be like the music industry, but then art, like the consumption of images, it's like a completely different beast. And it's so weird in the ways, like in the myriad of ways that people consume images, that it's not quite like the origins of let's say, record companies, that they were trying to say, okay, let's regulate, and let's measure how many times they play us on the radio. And for every time they play you on the radio, you have to, send some royalties to, to us, our side, and we'll send some money to the artist. But the consumption of images is super abstract, in the sense that there's nothing quite like a record company, let's say, that is trying to protect their own interest, because they were making a ton of money if songs were played on the radio and then afterwards on whatever, streaming music apps. But they want to protect their money. They're like saying, we're not going to lose money here. So we're going to take you to court because we want our money. And yeah, sure, we'll throw some money to the way of the artist. But we don't have that. Like, I'm super interested in what happens in terms of like fair use and copyright in the like bigger art world. And there's always like these, I would say, exemplary battles, like copyright legal battles, where they go, for Richard Prince, or, where I was, watching one the other day that the Uffizi was trying to sue Jean-Paul Gaultier because they printed like Botticelli in a shirt, and they were like, hey, you're selling this for a lot of money, we want our cut. But it only seems to happen when there's a lot of money involved. Like, if you're a small artist and you're making some money, like, people don't really care. So I think that one of the stands that you also take in terms of us as like this almost, I wish we could call ourselves like a guild of artists, but
Mhm.
it's kind of impossible to cover us with like a whole blanket so that we could behave like, one big, yeah, entity that could then say, hey, we're going to protect our our copyrights, and we're going to fight back. But since, artists have usually had to do this individually, it's very, very hard to like go into a legal battle with corporations that are, they're going to be fine pouring millions of dollars into, their legal team just to fight somebody off.
Yeah.
And if you, and this is like the weirdest part, if you get to court, it's so ambiguous. Like fair use is still so weird. So
Mhm.
weird. So I would say that, what I got from what you were saying is that we have to be mindful of that. We have to protect what we do.
Mhm.
I think it's super hard right now because we don't quite have the tools to protect what we do. Um, and that these companies that eventually are going to become or sell out to like bigger corporations, their purpose is to make money. Their purpose is to make, as much money as they can. Um, do you think there's a model that you would feel more comfortable with? So, for example, Unreal Engine, which maybe you're familiar with, you probably are. The like Unreal Engine 5 has like an open source assets where people could just, they could just say, hey, I'm going to make trees. I'm going to upload these trees. Sometimes they're free, so you have to pay for the license of Unreal. But
Yep.
if you want to use those free assets, you can. Or if you want to piecemeal buy from a bunch of artists that are going to feed a bunch of assets, that's what Unreal is hoping for. I'm sure it's going to be like crazy successful. Um,
Yep.
they're you can, if you're making a video game, if you're making whatever, an animation, you can just say, hey, yeah, awesome, I'm gonna buy a bench from this guy, some trees from this girl. They did an awesome street, so I'm gonna buy that. And that sounds cool, that sounds awesome. I have to say, still, Epic owns Unreal, so it's $30 billion company, so they're still gonna make money. They still want to make money, like that's their
Of course.
whole
Yep.
deal. But they're being fair. Do you think, is there a model in here that you would consider to be fair? That because I think one of the things that you also pushed was compensation, like fair compensation. That's
Yeah.
what we want as artists, right? If you're going to use something of mine, I want to be compensated for
Yep.
it, and that's totally fine. Is there a
Well,
model that you would consider to be fair?
yeah. So I'm not going to pretend that I can paint a picture of the perfect ethical model,
Mm,
right? I think that based on sort of common sense and having experience as an artist and having experience as a professional artist, I can imagine bones, right? Which I do outline in the video, and I'm not the first person to strike upon those things, and I've heard parts of that brought up in different discussions. People are coming together on that on their own and as a group, right? So
mm,
as I say in the video, what I mentioned there is it should be built on opt-in,
mm-hmm,
right? So not just
mm-hmm,
opt-out options. It should be built opt-in from the ground up.
mm-hmm,
It should have opt-out options. It should be besides opt-in images that have an opt-out option. It would need to have. It could be built with Creative Commons and royalty-free
mm,
images. That includes things which the copyright has lapsed on, right?
mm-hmm.
So after an artist's
Yeah,
death,
70 years. Yep.
yeah. So all of that makes sense to me, and it includes Creative Commons
Mm-hmm,
imagery, right? So um, those models allude to what you are feeling is right about something like Unreal Engine's asset store, right? Or
mm-hmm,
so many other examples like that. The difference between those and what's going on with these AI models is that everyone who's putting something on the Unreal store opted in. They chose to
right,
do it. They are doing it in good faith. They
right.
have some reasonable expectation that people are going to use this in some creative capacity that they feel that they agree with, but I want to be very clear that even Creative Commons imagery, right? If you look at it, it still has attribution requirements at times, right? Like there are still Creative Commons images that as far as I'm concerned, right? If this is what an artist has asked for, you should do your best to respect it, right? Even on Creative Commons images, there are artists who ask, yeah, you can use it for anything, including commercial projects, but you must attribute it to me, right? It's perfectly free, as it's so hard to mention my name, right? So even and we might say that in the world we live in, Creative Commons basically amounts to a radical way to distribute your creativity in the age that we live in. Even in that context, we do still have some reasonable expectations that people and other artists will treat us fairly, right? We don't just leave it out there without anything. So to segue that back into what you were, because you put a lot on the table there, but the models that aren't ethical, that I don't believe are ethical, that are what we are looking at now, right? Yes, I understand that we're in an unfortunate situation right now where artists are being sort of put through this situation when we're not at our most organized, right? Where we're not on the same page about these things. And that is a problem, but the data set right now, this data set, right? And we're going to have to think about this. I'm sorry, I have a dog. I apologize for that.
Dude, don't apologize for that. We're about to have a dog.
She usually never barks. My stream viewers
she can bark away.
Attest to that.
She can bark away. That's totally fine.
So these data sets, more are going to come up, right? But the Lion data set, as big as it is, 5 billion images and different models, that doesn't mean they used all 5 billion. I believe, if I remember my research correctly, I think Stable Diffusion is trained on some smaller amount. Was it 3 or 2 billion of the 5 billion data set? And then it mixes in other data sets, including an aesthetically weighted data set, which might be something interesting to discuss. But that's a huge number, but it's a number, right? If push comes to shove, if it becomes, in heavy air quotes, real, right? If something goes to court, if there is litigation, if lawyers, real professionals look at this, as intimidating as that number seems to us, it's a number, and you can put people on it and they can investigate every single person in the data set, or using reverse image searches, trying to find, they could say, this artist was infringed upon this many times. This artist was infringed upon this many times. This artist was infringed upon this many times. It's an overwhelming number to us as individuals, but when push comes to shove, it is a finite set, and there would be something to be done there. Not saying it wouldn't take incredible resources, but that seems clear to me.
Right. And, in all honesty, all we need is like one artist to be found, once artist rights that were broken, just by finding one of them, then that sets a precedent, and then that's it. You don't need to prove that it's like 100 artists, just of one, and then you realize, okay, this might, if you extrapolate that, this might have happened with, millions of artists. But here's what I'm asking, and this is like, I guess this is the one that may deflate people the most, because let's say, yes, you opt in. Let's say we have models where, this is utopic, but let's say artists are well compensated and they opt in and they just feed, a bunch of images into these data banks, and they provide all the assets, which are going to be, probably minuscule compared to the billions of images that they can just right now, which is like Wild West, that they can just, scour over, the world, the universe that is Google Images. But let's say we opt in. Wouldn't we just be delaying something that's inevitable? Because AI is going to start creating images. And once this is going to be like, there's no law to this, but if AI, if whatever algorithm they use starts, reconstructing images from things that they are legally, acquiring or licensing, the final image can't hold like a license that belongs to 100 people. It just can't. It's just a new image that exists and has already been licensed.
Mm-hmm.
But it can theoretically start to learn from itself. It can start to put those images that it's making onto another data center, and it can
Mm-hmm.
start to use those assets. And then eventually, and this is like where I'm thinking, okay, we can protect ourselves now, but maybe there's a future generation of artists that, I'm sorry, but this thing doesn't need you anymore. They don't need open source assets. They created its own open source assets.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be my question to you. Like, if that is like thinking about this sort of dystopic outcome where it says, okay, let's play nice at the beginning, but I'm going to win this game in the end. The AI is thinking, okay, sure, I'm going to throw some money at you. I'm still going to make billions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw some money at you. And if I throw enough money at you, you're going to give me enough images to feed myself. And then eventually I don't need you. And then we're back to like square one, which is to say, okay, we started from a fair model, and now we are creating this self-sustaining thing. Was the question not always then a bigger one, which is like, is this thing really, like, are we okay with this thing existing? Like, it's not just like we want to get paid. Like, are we just okay with this? So my question to you would be like, are you okay? Like, are you okay with we could visualize a fair model, but it's a fair model that would degenerate into pretty much what we are seeing nowadays. And with time, and this thing is what freaks me out, is that this is so quick. Like, I think we thought it was going to take time. I think we're really noticing that it takes way less time than we anticipated for this thing to learn. So I'm always super excited by the sort of existential questions, which is like, whoa, but this is heavy stuff. So do you not think, like, I want to hear where you stand on this. And I was trying to find parallels about this, and maybe this is like hyperbolic, but in some ways I'm the sort of person who's like horrified and super excited at the same time. But I wonder if humanity, at some point, when we see that this thing is just, this train going like 1,000,000 miles an hour, we just say, hey, do you remember when in the 90s we cloned something, and we know that we can clone stuff? We can clone mammals, and, and remember when we said, no, we can't do this. And even though there's like, there would be, a very obvious, well-intended uses for cloning, because you could have a heart. Right there is your heart. Right there is your liver. Right there is your spine. You could use it in good ways. Humanity said, well, that's one good way, but there's a million of ways in which this can go like, crazy. Do you think we're going to probably get to that point where we say, hey, this is fascinating, but maybe it's not in our best interest to do this, to pursue this, and then everything just like comes to a halt?
Well, okay, so all right, let me take it piece by piece. So first off, the humanist values argument is very important to me personally, right? And I do have a bit of that in the video. There's, especially in the middle of the video, a lot of the legal points that I bring up at the bookends of the video, at the beginning and at the end. And then a lot of the middle is me making a more humanist value case that I think is very important. And I insisted on putting it in there because I know that I think artists are sensitive to those things, and that they really care. They feel that. They can feel the humanist angle. So the problem with that is that the humanist angle is not going to work for everybody. And it's a harder thing to try to litigate or to try to gain some sort of compensation on, right? But so I just want to put that disclaimer out there. So for anybody who, I say that because you mentioned that this might be deflationary, right? So
Yeah.
I just want a disclaimer for people listening that the humanist angle, we can worry about that because we live in a world of chaos, and we've all met people who seem to not care that much for how other people feel. So I get that, but I don't think it's a reason to deflate, because there are much more practical, much more earthy ways to address this and to look at this as a technological advancement, as a sphere change to the way that we deal with technology in the world. And it's not just about the humanist aspect. But that disclaimer there, I think the humanist stuff is very, very important. It's almost like you're asking me if I would trust that everybody else would pump the brakes on this experience. And unfortunately, I don't think so. I think that the world is made up of variety, right? People want all sorts of different things, and people's interests and their incentives, they diverge. And it's a little bit more rare and beautiful when they converge, right? As bad as that seems to be sometimes. But yeah, I think if it were to go that way, there would always be some subset of people who are just like, more, give me more, just like full chaos, right? Like it doesn't matter, you know. There's always the kind of people who just, it's like they're already advocating for a ghost in the machine that is not there right now, right? They are going to be super excited to defend these things and to advocate for them and to say that it's okay and that we should let it happen, as if there is a conscious experience there to enjoy it or something like that. And I think it's very important for us to remember that, as far as we know, you know, laws are to serve people and protect property, right? Like that's mostly what laws are for. And we should absolutely focus on what this does to human beings. And I think we should be very slow to let something run forever on its own for bad incentives just because it can, right? I mean, we regulate tons of stuff like that. We regulate tons of stuff that can be done, but we have all collectively decided shouldn't be done. And I know that this is such a complicated one and such a world-changing one that I don't know what's reasonable to expect there. But I think it is really the most far out there question right now in the world. With people who say, like when I'm having these when I'm reading comments about this stuff, either left on my things or on other people's things, when people say it's going to completely change the world, or you shouldn't even be having this discussion because it's going to lay low capitalism, so we need to redo capitalism, like the conversation explodes out into things that are not about art almost immediately, right? And the thing is that I agree with them. I 100% agree with them. I also think it's the biggest question on the table these days, right? Or absolutely one of the biggest, right? It's huge. I agree it will be world changing. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't put in the effort to try to align it with our interests, right? There can be a huge alignment problem with these systems and the people who handle them, right? Own them, handle them, whatever it is. And if you really believe that it's going to change the world, and it gives you that sort of awe-inspiring feeling of just like, well, let's just let it go. Let's watch what happens, right? Which I can sympathize, right? Like I love that stuff, but I think any realistic version of that includes people coming in and knocking it left and right and trying to adjust it towards human values and human benefit, rather than undermining them or being built on exploitation, you know?
Right. I have to say, I fall on the camp of, I want to see this. You know, there is a part of me that is just, because I'm fascinated by how the art world for, millennia has just changed and morphed and mutated and questioned itself and transformed into something else. And, in in art, like capital A art, I'm using quotation marks there too. But um, we use like dumb terms to just refer to how artists, we use referential appropriation to refer to speak about how artists can use other people's work or other people's work, and we've been okay with it for, I would say we're still okay with it. And like, there's still enormous artists that just, just say, oh, I'm going to work off of this. I'm going to take this from here. I'm going to take this from here. And I've always been an advocate because I've always been fascinated by this. I've always been an advocate that because it's such an ambiguous question. I mean, it's so hard to solve this, that if there is to be this law, I always put it in the side of creativity, like liberty. Like, yes, let the artists do whatever they want. Let the artists do whatever they want. Like if they want to, use collage some stuff that existed and make something else, great, let them. If it has to be binary, which it doesn't have, like artists, anything but, black and white, it's always like a gray area. But if it has to be law, like legal or illegal, I would let people just use, anything. I've always been on that camp because I kind of see, like when I trace back art history, I noticed that that's what we've done always. Like, we may see it differently, but it used to be like if you were in the Renaissance doing anything, the way to signal that you were educated is that you were copying, like, Roman sculptures that copied Greek sculptures. And you would use the same pose and you would use the same composition. And that was a way to say, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've been educated. I know my place and I know my origins. And this sounds like, maybe if we say Renaissance, it sounds like, oh, but that's, come on, dude. That's like, 600 years ago. But the truth is, like, for example, there's a painting, there's a Manet painting that's like Luncheon on the Grass. It's a very famous painting. That painting has been put through the ringer. That painting comes from like a Renaissance engraving. There's a little part of a Raphael, Raphael designed it, but this other artist, Raimondi, or I forget, he actually was the engraver. And he, Manet decided to use like a little corner of the engraving and say, oh, I'm going to use this composition and I'm just going to put some clothes on this guy. But it's very much so like saying, hey, I know my place too. I know where I come from. And he's signaling to Raphael. And I think that's amazing because then Manet did that. And then Picasso ended up doing like 15 versions of Luncheon on the Grass. And then nowadays you see people taking these weird photographs, all of them being referential to Luncheon on the Grass. And it's one of those images that has been like constantly, deconstructed, reconstructed, reinterpreted, recontextualized. And it's awesome. It's awesome. Every time I see that, every time I see how, 1,000 years of art can link together, I'm always like, hell yeah, that's awesome. That's where we come from. That's amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. And there's a side of me that says, if we stop this, aren't we stopping that? Aren't we stopping, like, the thing is, this is just, exponential in a way that we can't even measure right now. But it is like this essence that the artist has had throughout centuries to say, I want to take what has come before me and use it. I want to use it and mold that clay again and reshape it and throw it out again so that somebody 100 years from now can do the same thing. The thing is, I think time is just different for us right now. What used to take, a couple of generations, now it's like milliseconds for like a thing, this AI to say, I can reinterpret it. I can reinterpret it. I can reinterpret it. And it's just doing that ad infinitum. Like it's doing that for as long as you want. So it's what's really scary. What I've noticed that's really scary for me is that we are really following the same, like it's almost as if like for thousands of years we've gotten ready to this point where we're going to take this step. But the thing is, we're not realizing, like, we've always moved at a human pace. And now suddenly this is us, like, I don't know, the brightest, fastest computing mind in the world can't compete with like the calculator in your Nokia phone. It just can't.
Yeah.
So we're realizing that the pace of this thing is not our pace. Like, it doesn't abide by the rules that we have understood, that humanity has like shaped and reshaped. This thing is saying like, oh no, I can go fast. I can go really, really, really fast. And that's what's like super scary to me, but also like super exciting, because I can't deny it. Like, as a painter that's fascinated by where we come from, and I'm not trying to say that the people that would be against it or would pose some sort of opposition are not conscious of where we come from. But as somebody who's like deeply, deeply fascinated by that, I'm always like, I want to roll the dice. I want to see what happens. I really do. The thing, I'm also conscious that it's like, hey, you might get a really bad roll. Like, you may be, rolling something that says, you know what? Human creativity changes completely. The way you understand human creativity, it's gone. And you have to re-signify it. And that's it, period. Like, that's... Right. So the gamble is like enormous. The stakes are like so high, I feel. But that also makes it exciting. I always feel bad. Like, I'm always like, why am I excited about this? But I'm like super excited. So,
no, I think it's really important to honor the emotionality of that and like what you're going through, right? I say it in the video, actually. There's a moment in there where I say that, considering the demographic, it's unfortunate that people would cast artists as sort of Luddites who are backwards facing or don't like new things, because we tend to be like you. We tend to be excited and amazed, and we're the ones who can project very, very wildly into the future. So I think it's important to honor that exciting emotionality that comes up there. Now, I'm like that too, right? Like, I've been a science fiction fan since I was a kid, right? Like, and I'm mystified by what's possible, and I want to know what's possible, right? But if we table the gamble, right, which we can come back to, right? Like, we can go all the way out to the edge of philosophy and be like, how do we define humanity if we take creativity off the table? If the machines subsume creativity, what do we have left, right? Because usually when people ask, like, what separates us from the animals or from the stones, one of the things that always gets mentioned is creativity, human creativity. So in so much as those qualifiers and arguments matter to people, there's something to be discussed there. But if we table that for now, and we look at a lot of the stuff in the run-up, first off, I want to point out the weirdness, again, I think this is worth saying, of saying, like, it is going so fast. It can go so fast. It is much faster than us. I just want to remember, there's no it like us there. There is no conscious experience. It is not experiencing, as far as we know, time, rushing, feelings of work being done quickly, or something like that. There is no feeling. There's nothing it's like to be stable diffusion, as far as we know. But there is something it's like to be human beings, right? So there's just our time. I would argue there is only our time. The day we make a sentient machine that is feeling, then I would accept the argument that there is stable diffusion's time and that it can do things very quickly. Of course, if we could prove somehow that it was conscious, which brings up the hard problem of consciousness and all of these other big questions. But I think for now, I think it's very important that we remember it is just our time. There is only us experiencing these things at our speed, and there is no other experience of a faster speed going on. And if we want to talk about the rate at which stable diffusion is doing things, that is being decided by its CEO. That is just the CEO trying to purchase enough NVIDIA graphics cards to make it process that at that speed. And the reality of that romantic idea of things moving extremely quickly is a reality of him getting venture capital funding, being able to buy more graphics cards, and being able to train more versions of the model with those graphics cards before anybody can catch up to his misdeeds and anybody can litigate against him. So I understand the impulse to see it in the, and again, like I said, I love the romance of it, right? But if we're going to have a practical conversation about it, if we de-romance it, it's just human beings in boardrooms deciding how fast this is happening. It's not the computers. It's not some built-in function of them, and they are funding them to make them go quicker. So I want to put a little bookmark on that. I just think that it's important to bring that up. I also want to go back to the things that you said about copying artists, right? Which is definitely a broader conversation about how we learn, how we make progress as artists. But I want to point out that when you copy, or even the examples that you brought up, people in the Renaissance, when they copy things to show others, I know where I'm placed in history and I know how to honor the artists of the past, right? It is being done with a conscious intent. And you are ostensibly aware that you are doing it, right? In the example that you presented, they're doing it to show others, like, look how smart I am, or something like that. And I don't know if that's the coolest thing to do or something like that, but there is an awareness, artist to artist, of what they are doing. And whatever the debate is there about, is it an homage? Is it ripping it off? Is it fair use? Is it copyright infringement? Like, which is, I'm not a lawyer, right? And I do want to contest here that there is a there to have these questions, right? But all of those nuances are occurring on a playing field of human intention. And the problem with these systems is that they scale the ability for infringement to such an extreme point that they obfuscate the nature of intent. And they put tools in people's hands without informing them, I don't think, about everything that's going on here, that such that the end user might not be aware of who he's infringing on and when. A person who types into Stable Diffusion, a dog with beautiful red colors on a sunny day, might be horrified to find out the sheer number of artists' work that went into producing the result that comes out the other side, right? Again, a lot of these programs are black boxes, and we need to have the conversation about, there's a part of this conversation that really needs to happen amongst machine learning experts and not artists, right? But the models are extremely difficult to understand. And when we say a red dog, we're not quite sure what Stable Diffusion does. Does it say, well, red dogs don't exist, so it's got, like, is it going to by necessity go find art because red dogs aren't real, right? Well, you know what I mean, a really red dog. There's dogs that are a shade of red, but we don't know what it does, and the end user doesn't know might not know what it does there, and that scales the possibility for infringement, which, by the way, copyright infringement can still happen even if there's no intent to infringe, right? That's well attested to in the legality. But those tools are cracking that system wide open in a way that needs very careful investigation, right? There's a difference between an artist doing a willful homage, right? Bad faith copying, different discussion. But a willful homage.
Fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that I want to bring up is that, let's say I take one of your paintings, right? I take one of Nicholas's paintings and I put it on a t-shirt and I sell one t-shirt, right? And I did it without asking you. I just swiped it and I sold the t-shirt. Everything that I did there is illegal. I can't do that to you. And you are allowed to come after me for doing that. The trick is that on a scale from human to human, the depth of the infringement ends at the one shirt. And crazy things can happen in court, but you would basically be entitled to the money I made off of the shirt that I sold, right? And that's it. You know, it's not going to become this globe spanning, completely world distorting, creativity deciding event, right? And
Right.
if I sold 5 shirts, you are entitled to the money that I made off of the 5 shirts. So human to human, these things are very sane, and they've been litigated for years and years and years. These tools are perfect recreation weapons for the indefinite future. So the scale of the infringement there becomes quite different,
Right.
right? So someone like the example everybody likes to use is Gregor Rutkowski,
Yeah.
right? Gregor's first name is Polish. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name. I apologize. Most people call him Greg online, so I'll just call him Greg. But fair use. Now again, I'm not a lawyer, and I have things I want to say about how I believe there is a there, and I believe for good reason. I think that these things should be discussed, but so much of fair use, copyright, everything like that is about fair use specifically is about, is the product impinging on the same market as the original? I find it a little hard to believe that 90,000 prompts of art similar to what someone like Greg would have done that explicitly ask for it in his style
Mm.
is not directly impinging on his market or lowering the perceived value of his work. The optics in public are, I hate to say it, but very damaging. If people in general are hearing that, oh, people are getting good results from just getting something in Greg's style, that's interesting. Like, that is a scope of damage that can be done that is unlike
Mm.
most technologies that we have dealt with so far, and that is unlike what people can generally do one to the other, right?
Right.
So now again, anything, fair use, copyright, I'm not a lawyer. I'm happy to own that. What I'm trying to argue here is that there's a there. It's gray enough
Mm.
that it should be investigated.
Right.
People should look at it. Professionals should actually look at it. And we shouldn't hear it from the peanut gallery and honestly, people like me. We shouldn't be hearing it from people like me. We should be hearing it from actual embarred litigators. And we should be taking their opinion seriously on, it looks like there's problem here, or it looks like there's no problem here. That's what I'm saying.
Right. I would say, because you go into how you go about this for a little bit in the video, but talking about how it differs from artists, having like a reference file. When I was younger, like I was educated as an illustrator in what I think was, because this is like super early Photoshop days. Like I went to school 95 to 99. I went to art school. And, Photoshop was still like a very, I mean, a tool that everyone was just like learning to use. Everyone probably except Craig Mullins and like Dave McKean. But everyone else was like, okay, this is new to us. But for the rest of us that were, we wanted to draw, and I was doing like storyboarding and animatics and a few like print jobs and stuff. I had to do stuff with like markers and, super, super old school, making patchwork if there was a mistake. Sure. I mean, super old school. But one thing that we had where, at the illustration studio that I used to work at was like rows of cabinet files. Rows and rows and rows of cabinet files. And my illustration studio, the place that I worked at, they got magazines, about 10 magazines every day. They were subscribed to 10 magazines every day. And there was somebody whose job was to look through magazines and take some scissors and then say, okay, this is a boat. We have files on boats. And then you put it on the file, the file cabinet under B and boats. So that when we needed like a speedboat of some sort of, we would go to our file and we pull out a speedboat and we knew what a speedboat looked like. Again, this is like, early 99, early 2000. People weren't like, you just didn't go to like Google to like try to find what something looked like. So for me, my education was like, yeah, illustration does not exist if we don't take stuff from other people without asking. Like, I'll put it bluntly that way. All of illustration, all of it, uh, Dean Cornwell, I'm sure he used photos from magazines or from, wherever he lifted them from. And he's like, oh, this background, this Moroccan background. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I need that. I'm going to change it a little bit, but I need that. And I'm going to put it as my background. All of us come from there. Granted, the laws were different before late 80s. There was stuff that was fine to use. Warhol, a painting / whatever that went for like $200 million. The one of his Marilyns, $200 million. He didn't take that photo of Marilyn. He did. That was a publicity still that somebody took when Marilyn was promoting like a movie. The thing is, nobody cared. That's the thing. Like back then, nobody cared. Nobody. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. Warhol is using it, but that wasn't his. He never credited it, the person. Some of these publicity stills, nobody knows took those photos. Nobody. Now, I'm not saying like there's not a right or wrong to this. Like ideally, sure. It would have been cool if Warhol said, you know what, I want to use your photo. How much, like I'm gonna make some lithos. How much would you charge me for that? Oh, I don't know, in the 60s, like $200. Okay, sure, it's $200, and then that's good. At least you put it in writing, and you're like, hey, look, I paid what the person said like they wanted, and that's good. But it's not really what happened. And most illustrators in the 60s, 70s, I mean, they had files and files and files and files of photos. When I used to go to the New York Public Library, there's a photo collection that you can pull out photos if you need to, use them for whatever you want. And I'm sure, 100% sure, that I question if these are photos that the public library can give out to people as if they were their own. These are cutout photos that come from other publications that have their own copyright, I'm sure. They belong to somebody else. And there's like, I don't know if it exists anymore. I'm pretty sure it does, even though it's probably like a dinosaur. But I remember going through those files and there's just like, thousands of files on whatever you would want to take out. And I used to, when I had to do like an illustration, and it was like, oh, Victorian alleyway. And I was like, oh, I have no idea what a Victorian alleyway looks like. I'm going to go to the public library and look Victorian, architecture. And I'm going to take some photos, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the one. I want this one, but I'm going to change it enough. And this was always the way we thought. I'm going to change it enough so that I can put like a little kitten here and like this car here. And then a lot of illustration was really like the core, like where we come from. I'm going to say we because I graduated as an illustrator, even though I'm not really an illustrator anymore. But my heart is like that of an illustrator. But where we come from is that. It's just people piecing things together, so much so that that's what people do nowadays. I mean, there's only a few people that can say, I don't need anything. I can come up with everything on my own. But for most of us, we just had to like, scavenge through things like and say, okay, this and this and this. And maybe I have a bunch of photos, and then maybe that's giving me an idea of what I want to do. And maybe I can redraw it or, shift its perspective if I need to do a background. And, again, this is, very fundamental stuff, but fundamentally, because I know that you posed that there's a big difference. And I would argue, is there a big difference between us pretty much doing the same thing? Again, we can only do it at a human level. I could only take out a certain number of photos, and I can only consume a certain number of photos from the public library.
Yeah.
And then it requires me, and I guess the conversation, it kind of can end in intent because I had an intent whilst this thing has no intent. It doesn't even understand what intent is. But I could shift it and change it in order to tell a story, in order to tell the story that I had to tell, that I was hired to tell, that I wanted to tell. But in the, in its barest form of saying, let me grab a lot of stuff and let me see if I can shift it and change it. Recognize its essence, let's say. Let's get like super esoteric about it. Recognize the essence of something and then piece it together and then produce something that you could argue it's, again, fair use, different enough. I've recontextualized it enough that you could say, it's my piece. It's my piece. Yeah, sure, it comes from a million different places. But it's like, what artist doesn't come from a million different places? Like, you could sniff every single artist. You could sniff where they come from. You could say, oh, sure, they probably watched. I could tell you the 10 artists that I come from. And you can sense it. You could see it. And the fact that you can sense it probably comes from having consumed a lot of these images and having reshaped them. So I wonder if you, like, because you do say that there's like a fundamental difference between that. And I wonder if you see them that different, because aside from the fact that, like I said, we could end this argument super easily and say, you know what, this thing lacks intent, and that's it, period. And as long as it lacks intent, then it's not even a conversation worth having. But in the sense of putting pictures together, I mean, collages, like Dada collage, Dadaism has like amazing collage, and it's just cutting other people's work, cutting it out, pasting it, and recontextualizing it. But it's other people's. Well, you could tell where the other people's work is. Like, you don't have to look at a data center to say, oh, there's like you said, 90. I don't know the number that you mentioned, 90K searches for this artist. No, you can just say, that's that photographer, that's that photographer, that's that photographer. Rauschenberg has, a Rubens in there. Do we just not care because it's Rubens? It's too far away. Like, we don't care. We could do anything to Rubens. But I'm sorry, and I'll end with this. But it seems like we care when it just hits close. And you probably saw like the hailstorm that happened. I wasn't familiar with it. When this kid, I'm guessing it's a kid, he's a kid, but this French kid said, hey, Kim Jong-gi passed, who I respect enormously. I'm sure you do too. And I did this, I feed this into Stable Diffusion, and I created this, I taught this algorithm to draw like him. Enjoy, please credit, and people are like, what? Like what? So I'm wondering if, that was a very sensitive subject, but I'm wondering if we're like, oh, Rubens is fine. It was like a too soon, thing, rather than saying like, okay, are we going to get mad in 2 years? Are we pissed off right now? Are we fundamentally pissed off because it was Kim Jong-gi? Or are we just like okay with certain things? Like, if somebody had taught how to do a Norman Rockwell, will we be up in arms? Like, so I'm wondering those two things. Like, in terms of reference, what do you think? And in terms of like, do you think that there's just like, we are touched more when we can say, hey, that's an illustrator of our time. This feels weird. But if I told you, look, I'm doing Egon Schiele's, you'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Go crazy. Go nuts.
Yeah. So let me start with the Rubens aspect. That feeling of like, oh, well, if it's Rubens, we don't care, right? Well, it's subjective person to person who cares. But I want to remind you, the law doesn't care because it's been 70 plus years since his death.
Oh yeah,
right?
Let me stop you there. No, yeah, but museums hold copyrights over paintings that they own.
Well, well, I'd like to know more about that, because
they do. You can't reproduce something that a museum. Whenever you go to a museum, and sometimes they're lenient, but sometimes when they say you can't take pictures here, it's because they actually own. They're like the caretakers of the copyright of that particular image, which is ludicrous to me. Absolutely, there are certain things that I abhor about the art world, and one of them is saying like, this is for you, but not so much. Because we are the ones that are in charge of reproducing this, not you. As soon as yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would bookmark that, and maybe maybe we do a little research on that later. Because from my personal experience, for example, looking for Creative Commons images of Caravaggios for videos and things like that, my legal research into that found that museums may own copyright over a particular reproduction of a painting, like the photograph of the painting, but they do not own the copyright of the painting. That is fully in the public domain at this point. So maybe we just bookmark that.
Sure. Yeah, perfect.
I don't think we need to sort of research that live, but so even if, so there's a reason the copyright statute is there, right? Which is that to not get super metaphysical, right? At the point with how distant Rubens is, right? It's fair to say in most cases, I think, that there's no one to suffer from the infringement, right? There is no conscious being hurt by reproductions of Rubens' paintings, right? His lineage has not managed to last the 600 somewhat necessary years to get to the current era. He's not being hurt, right? So I do now. If we want to get into an argument about artist respectability, I'm happy to go there, right? Like I think that we all have varying opinion just on our guts, off subjectively. We're like, okay, so you only do exact copies of drawings of images in Vogue? All right, well, that's interesting. Like I think we all have subjective gut reactions to things like that. So I think that's a different discussion, right? But if we try to keep it sort of utilitarian, people who are living will suffer from having their work used without their consent in ways that they never could have predicted, in a way that reduces their market viability when they have put effort into their skills. And a dead person at that distance does not. So the problem with something like the Kim Jung-gi AI is that I think we were pretty quick to forget sometimes that he has a family, and Kim's work does not disappear into the public domain as soon as he dies. It becomes his estate, and his family is legally entitled to gain compensation from his estate, that is to say, his intellectual property, for a certain amount of time. And the copyright reverts to them, and they are the ones who are now allowed to license Kim's images. So the problem still stands with a recently dead artist who has direct family who should be gaining from their hard work, an estate, as we're all aware of. So to make a product that either in potentiality or implication or explicitly is saying, check this out, it makes a Kim Jong-gi drawing, right? That is putting it into direct market competition. And again, it's for lawyers to litigate what the actual damages, what the stuff there is. But I would argue it is putting it in direct competition with the remaining artworks that it is his family's right to charge licensing fees for. Because I think we as artists often forget, because the gig economy these days sort of becomes we kind of think of all artwork as work done on spec, like all commission work, because that's what most artists get. We forget that artists also can license their work.
Right.
It's not just that if someone sees Greg's work on ArtStation, Greg Rakowski, if someone sees Greg's work on ArtStation, it's not just that they need to then email Greg and say, can you make me a new one that's similar? There's a licensing option on the table where they say, that picture is perfect. And if you didn't do it for another company, what's the licensing fee for me to use it? And then Greg could license it. And even when you license it, there are nuances and details to how it gets licensed. So you can license it for non-commercial use, for commercial use. And then even if you charge a licensing fee for commercial use, there's more nuances there, because you can charge a licensing fee that is commensurate to the expected number of viewership. So you can say, I license it for this price up to 1,000 views. I license it for this price up to 5,000 views. I license it to this price up to a million views. So the things that actually need to happen there with art after death, when there's an estate that still stands to gain from it, are quite sophisticated. There's a lot of interesting legal stuff going on there. And yeah, I think if there's any money to be made off of my art, I expect that my wife will be able to gain some of that after my death. If I get killed by a bus tomorrow, I would hope that she would still be able to do something with it. So the Kim Jong-gi AI is really, I don't think that that's a case where you're dealing with someone who's really not alive anymore. You're dealing with the family now, and artists' estates do have a lot of say for a considerable period of time. Yeah, as long as there's a conscious person
Mm.
suffering there, I really, for me, that's the line, right? So
Right.
Rubens, and this happens to align with copyright law, again, as far as I know,
Mm.
right? But let something I have done. I can go to the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and I can take a picture of the permanent collection. I can take a picture of that, and I can do whatever I want with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. So the the Rubens situation happens to align with that. But even if it didn't align with that, I would argue the fact that there's no one there to suffer really does make a substantial difference in the actuality of what's going on here.
Right. So
Um,
sometimes, oh, I'm sorry, but just to go off of that, and you can
yeah.
keep going after this if you want. Sometimes I also feel that even though the potential for this is, I mean, extraordinary is the word because it's just out of anything that we could envision or imagine. I would say, 10 years ago, to think that we would be having this conversation just doesn't seem like it was something plausible. But um, I would argue that because there is no intent, like we can be moved by certain images, like what
Mhm.
these all these algorithms spit out, but it's just ourselves projecting, you know, our own emotions, our own experiences, and we are doing the hard work of lifting all these images up to what they are because we are bringing them into our world, like our sensible world.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is not trying to say anything with it. Like, it's not. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. It just says, sure. This is binary to me. I just ran like this infinite number of operations, binary operations, and I put things together, and there it is. It serves this thing, and I don't know. You do what you want with it, but it doesn't. It doesn't. The weird thing is when we start to animate it in some reason, when we
Mhm.
start to think that there was an intent to that. But because there is no intent, I think that the most basic ways that we found to visually communicate is drawing. Us as a species, it is the most basic way. All we need is a tool, a substrate, and that's
Mhm.
it. Any tool that would do some sort of mark making, we need a substrate. It could be anything. It could be a tree, a rock, the ground. We could use a stick. It doesn't matter. It's the most simple way that we have found, the most instinctual way that we found to visually communicate.
Mhm.
I think this thing doesn't know how to draw. I think this thing knows. I mean, it's like it's like it walks like a duck, but it's not a drawing. It's not a drawing. It looks like a drawing. It's not a drawing. And misses like, and I don't know if like you have to draw to understand what a drawing is, but I have yet to see something that I say, oh yeah, that thing can draw. It can't draw. Even like I was really scared to like look at those. I mean, it just made a knot in my stomach, but to look at those Kim Jong-gi AI images because I
Mhm.
didn't want to look. It was one of those things like I don't want to look. I don't feel right. I just don't want to look. But I started looking. I was like, okay, let me see this crap. And I started
Mhm.
looking, and then there was something kind of reassuring where I said, okay, if you honestly think this is Kim Jong Gi, you're lost. You're gone. This is like
Yeah.
light years. Like Kim Jong Gi was light years away. They like I
Sure.
could name you 1,000 things that were part of the DNA of the makeup of a Kim Jong Gi that right now I don't think we can program that. We can't teach that. We can't put that into ones and zeros. We just can't. And
Mhm.
that's where I feel okay. Maybe we don't need to be this scared because I think there is a ceiling to this. I mean, unless we get to a point where this thing actually learns, like where you can where this thing understands what it means to have an intent through mark making. With that at that moment, yeah, just unplug me because that's like really scary. But I think that we are looking right now. It's just like these. zombie things that look like stuff that can be moving. Like I've spent like tons of hours doing like, making images, and I'm like, oh, I even feel like super dirty and weird. And I go like, oh fuck, this is cool. Like, should I be feeling this? Because this is cool. This is proper cool. Like
They
this
are
is,
cool.
and sometimes I'm like, how did this thing knows how to compose, or how did this thing like I get into the into a conversation where I'm like, hey dude, don't overthink it. It's not. It doesn't. It's just like, it's averaging things, and that's it. It's just averaging things that are well composed, so it understands how to compose, but it doesn't. But it doesn't really. But when I tell it, hey, draw something like Henry Clay, or draw something, because I've done it. I've done with like Masamune Shirow. I've done it with Henry Clay, Wilhelm Busch. I've done it with Joseph Clement Cole. When I tell it, hey, draw something, I'm like, oh, dude, you can't draw. You can't draw. Like, who are you kidding? You can't draw. You don't understand drawing. You don't. It's as easy as that. And when I realized that what it can't do, it's like super appeasing still. And I go like, you know what? Go nuts. Go nuts, because I can smell like the little stench in you. I can sense what you're trying to do, but you're not there. You're not there. You don't get it still. Like you don't get it. I'm super scared to piss off the machine, but I want to tell it like, yeah, you're not there, kid. You're not there yet. So that gives me like a ton of like tranquility, when I realize, oh, we're far. But we're not far in the sense like, oh no, this thing can get more sophisticated. I'm like, yeah, sure. It can create more sophisticated images. Sure. But it doesn't know how to create like something from zero. It doesn't. It just doesn't know. It doesn't understand why I would press harder on this line. It doesn't understand why I need a dark over there. It doesn't understand those things. It just doesn't. By the way, these things are prejudiced, and I don't know if you were pointing at this at the beginning of our conversation. These things are prejudiced as fuck. I'm sorry to say it like that, but it's crazy. First of all, like I've gone, there have been days that I'm like, let me see if this changed. I just type into Midjourney. I'm going to, AI. I just want to see what AI pops out. Like 3 out of 4, it's a white girl. It's a white woman with like some sort of, you're kind of looking at, sometimes it look like I would say Asian features. So there's something like they're going for something, and it's kind of sick. And like sick in a bad way, by the way. But I go like, what the hell is going on with these people? Like, what is up with this? AI should give me like the weirdest of, I don't know. I want it to break it. I want it to see if it breaks when it has to try to define itself. But it doesn't define itself. It's just popping out this like very, I would say, I was a teenage dude, but I would say it's a teenage dude thing. It's like, hey, you want a sexy chick that is like an AI? You want Scarlett's voice and her to be like a body for that voice. Here's this, quote unquote good looking girl, and I was, there's been times that I'm like, let me do this, let me iterate on this 10 times, and it's like, dude, every 4 little grid things, like 3 out of 4 are just like this same chick, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this? Like, these people are not cool. Like there is, and I would agree totally on you with this, like they're guiding this ship. Like if this was total chaos, like I would be a little more into it. But when I sense the stench of it, I'm like, oh no, this is not cool. Same thing happened with like Dave McKean. It's like when I saw that this thing was like, you could make this thing do proper Dave McKeans, like I was like, there's no fucking way. I'm sorry again, but there's no way that this thing is just randomly choosing like ways to reconfigure an image that kind of look like Dave McKean. It's like, no, you made it. You made an effort into trying to make it look like a McKean. It's like you can sense it. So Midjourney, at least, you can tell that this is for concept illustration. This is for dudes. It's like it's so heavy-handed at times. I feel that's when I also get some peace. Because I'm like, yeah, you could sense that there's some ignorance of curation. You could sense that there's limitation in the curation. And I'm like, okay, we are the dumbasses behind this still. And there's still there's still a long way to go. Like if we want this to be a sophisticated, like a tool that can actually work with us and we can push it and it can push us. Like I still think like, oh no, there's still a ways to go. And I don't think it's about computing power. I don't think it's about like processing. I don't think it's farms with like video cards. I think it's like conceptually something that is like, yeah, we're still far away. Those are the times when I'm like, one side of my brain is like, I want to watch this burn. Like, I want to see what happens. Like, I really want to see a world where images don't matter anymore. Like, what the hell does that look like? What does that make to us? And then this other side of me, I'm like, oh no, we're so far. We're still so far. So,
yeah, well, I want to highlight when you said like we are the assholes behind this, right? Yeah, I want to be very clear that we are the assholes behind this. So much of the conversation about this stuff is really treating it like a genie, and I don't mean as a metaphor. They're treating it like it's some magical, uncaged thing that kind of it's us. It's people. It's people releasing them. It's people making them. It's people coding them. We are the assholes making these things, and assholes can be influenced, and you can change things, and you can change people's mind, and you can create sane regulation, for the love of God, because that you can make it land on assholes like us, right? So I want to put a big star next to that as much as the discourse around this is really getting confused with, whoa, magic, it's like, it's people making it. It's people designing the machine learning models. It's people paying for them to be trained. And then there's people end users, right? So I'm glad that you get peace from those things. And I can't say that I get peace from them, unfortunately, but yes, they are biased. And that's a whole field of AI ethics. That is the whole field of AI ethics. That is a relatively new field that has arisen. And that's a field that people are really debating and looking into a lot. These data sets, by their nature, are coming in heavily biased. And these models have, again, this is a part of the conversation that really needs to be happening with machine learning experts, but they do things like memorize and overfit things, which are technical terms. And those are terms that these companies have used to describe their own models. So they have problems with memorization and overfitting, and they will reveal biases within the data set. Then there's just more overt things. Like I mentioned before, Stable Diffusion, one of its training sets is Lion Aesthetic, where those, I think Lion Aesthetic is in the millions of images. They have pre-rated them for, this is what people will think is pretty. So they have decided beforehand what is especially aesthetic. So they have already done a little bit of work up front to make it less likely that it will return certain things, and make it more likely that it will give certain kinds of results over and over again. Again, the nature of the results is for machine learning experts, I think, to debate. But I also want to mention that the idea of like, it's you put in a particular artist, it doesn't quite get it, it doesn't really draw like them. Those intuitions and those assumptions, again, I'm really glad they give you peace, but I would be very cautious with those because they're very susceptible to new evidence. I would be slow to anyone listening. I wouldn't let feelings like that make you feel like you shouldn't advocate for your rights and that you shouldn't support anybody who organizes against these things, because, like I said, it only takes one upsetting news article to reveal to you that it got better than you thought, quicker than you thought, again. And I would advise people to look into things like Dream Booth, which is an example of a product that these people are making that does a function called fine tuning. So you take something like Stable Diffusion. I want to emphasize, because people have been putting this out there the wrong way. It is my understanding that to do fine tuning, you take a pre-trained set, a generalized set like Stable Diffusion, you edit the way that it works to reduce its generality and make it much better at a specific thing. And one of the things it is very good at is reproducing an artist's style hauntingly well. Right. I believe that is what the Kim Jung-gi AI was using those functions. I don't know if it was Dream Booth in particular, but I believe it was a fine-tuning model. And the Kim Jung-gi may be a lucky example for them, right? Because the nature of his style might have certain snags in it here or there, but I have to admit, I've seen other examples of fine-tuning in something like Dream Booth where it nails it. I don't know how else to put it, but I saw one the other day that was an Archer fine-tuned model, and it just looked exactly like cells from Archer. I mean, it looks flawless. I couldn't tell. If you'd showed them to me, I would have said that was exactly right. That's a drawn animated show, and I've seen other examples of it doing that same thing with individual artists, not just house styles, things like that. So I'd be very slow to let feelings like that influence too much about like what actions we think are wise to do now or anything like that. I think that they're very susceptible to new evidence. And I think that if we want to defend ourselves appropriately, we need to be willing to, again, the position that we're in now would have seemed ludicrous 6 years ago.
Yep.
Right. So I think if we want to be good at defending ourselves, we need to be willing to sort of cast ourselves out into the future a bit with these things. We may be right, we may be wrong, but these things are code, right? They are programmed. There is math in there. So if we say, could this happen? They should be able, experts should be able to look at it and say there's something that does happen here, something that doesn't happen here. And again, the precedent is important because it may be mired in acceptable deficiencies right now. But if we set the precedent that the way that they acquired these data sets by using nonprofit arms to fund for-profit ventures is okay, then they're free to just carte blanche make the data set as large as they want. And the data set we've already shown that when the data set has 1 billion parameters versus 100 billion parameters, it produces much better results. So what happens when they just have complete carte blanche and they can just really go whole hog and take as much of it as possible? So I think we really need to, as much as we have to entertain those future possibilities, and we have to admit that we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. We got to learn the lessons of that, and we've got to be willing to project into the future a bit.
Now, talking about the future, do you see a model? Like, let's say, and I kind of started with this at the beginning, but let's say we, after litigation, years and years, we finally can put a stop to this. We are now using an Instagram equivalent or a socializing of visual, stimulus, whatever it is in the future, equivalent to, hey, if you go on this app, you're protected. You're protected. We will protect you. Any images that you put up here, they can't touch. They can't use, which I'm guessing some people are already thinking about that. Like, hey, or maybe ArtStation is thinking about that. Like, hey, we have some sort of, weight. Why don't we become the place where artists come here, put your images here, we'll protect them for you. We will do that for you. So now it's not Instagram. It's not like Wild West. Now there's going to be apps that are going to tell you, we protect you. Maybe for a fee, because everything's a business, but we're going to protect you. So let's say we have that, and we have a model that it's opt-in, and just artists that want to collaborate. And I hope they're not shunned, because that's not cool either. Like, if people want to do it, that's totally fine. But, people,
I'll come back to that. Please go ahead.
But people opt in, and they want to create all these assets and all, whatever it is that they do. They want to say, they're like, hey, dude, I'm sorry, but I don't sell as much as you do. I need to make a living. I need to, I'm good at doing trash cans. I'm going to make my models of trash cans, and I'm putting them up there so that, the thing can understand how to do a trash can. So, let's say there's this model, and again, let's say it just takes more time for it to get going. Right now it's going, again, unregulated speed. But we finally put some brakes into this. We finally say, hey, no, you got to move at a, probably comparatively like glacial pace. But that just makes it a little bit easier for us to make transitions, to understand contextually what's going on. And all of that is like, yes, we kind of got there. We got, respected. We protected our images. We have a place that we can put our images where, this bigger corporation, if you want, is protecting our own interests. Like, they can't touch our work. We're fine. We feel safe there. Wouldn't the end be the same? Like, like what I said at the beginning. I'm sorry if it was sounding like, like there's almost like no point to this. And I know that you want to be like, hey, no, don't get this idea. Don't get discouraged that there's no point, because then you're not going to want to fight. And I know that, I can recognize that your stand is like, hell no, you have to fight. Like, you have to fight this fight. I totally get it. And I don't want to, like, when I said deflate, it's the same thing. I don't want people to say like, hey, dude, because it's not. It's like knowing that you're going to die, but you still live your life. You still live a whole life, and you enjoy life, and you still know the outcome. You still know that we're all going to die. That's fine. But I always tend to think like, I'm always like, I always want to be like a brain in a jar just to watch what happens like in the future. And well, I don't know how I'm going to watch, but I guess they'll figure that out in the future. But
Yeah.
I want to be at that moment where it kind of happens, because it's almost going to be impossible to stop. Like what I was telling you, we did everything right. It's like we did everything right. We stopped it. We put some, some serious laws, because that's what we would need, laws. Like, you speak about ethics, but yeah, sure, but that has no teeth. Like,
Yeah, we need
laws, we're gonna frown upon people that do this? Like, that doesn't matter. If it costs less for a bigger company to do something, for a studio to produce an animation, for a studio to produce a video game, they're gonna be like, yeah, it costs less, dude. Like, it's fine. It's not illegal. It's fine. But at some point, this thing says, yeah, you fed me enough. I'm good. I'm good on my own. I'm really good. I'm fine. I myself, right? I produced the billions of images that I need.
Yeah.
And that was, and yes, like I said, we protected ourselves. We protected our generation. I don't know if, like, I kind of see this as a Titanic. I'm not saying we're going to hit like a glacier, but I'm saying like this thing doesn't make a U-turn. Like, this thing, we slow it down. I don't know if it stops, because it's not just this. You probably know this. Like, AI is not just a thing that makes like a cool medieval battle. Like, no, come on, dude.
Absolutely not.
AI upsamples shit in like ways that we don't even understand. Like, we thought we needed more power. We thought we needed like, faster processors and like bigger graphic cards. And it's like, no, we actually need just really intelligent upsampling, and we're good, and we're going to be amazing. Like, you thought you needed like a, 8090 RTX to do 8K in your OLED television in 10 years from now. It's like, dude, no, we thought of it backwards. We just needed really good AI that upsamples. And it's like our native image is like 720p, and we're just blowing it up to 8K, and it looks amazing. That's AI, and it's incredible, and its uses are incredible. VR is incredible. It's just infancy, because people are not willing to like dump money into it. And sadly, we haven't really been able to say, oh my God, this is going to change a lot also. There's an example in painting. I've talked about it, in our videos, but there's this group that actually taught, this algorithm what it means to paint a Rembrandt. They called it like the new Rembrandt. And they put that together with 3D printing, and they actually 3D printed a painting in layers, like they did, like the underdrawing, underpainting.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's still years. It was done years back when it cost like millions of dollars to do something like this. But every year it's going to be cheaper and cheaper. And what I would suggest, because I know that you pose like a very dire, like a very dark dystopian future, but it's one that's necessary to people to wake up a little bit, and I totally get that. I always, I don't know. I'm just like built like an idiot that way. But I always see, and it's something that, we can touch upon this if you want, but I do see it as democratizing. I do see it. And let me give you an example, like a totally simple example. When I never did it, but my brother used to do it, but they used to play like D&D, so I know a lot of people play D&D nowadays. And it used to be like, yeah, you're an elf with like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know much about it. But, and you used to kind of like imagine your character. You would imagine the dungeon that you're walking through or whatever. And then this thing comes out and you're like, oh, what the hell does that thing look like? And and the DM would describe it. And I know that was part of the magic, that you're like imagining something, you know, your friend right next to you, she's imagining something else, and it's kind of cool. But, you know, this thing is a tool, because it is, I'm sorry, that where somebody says, the thing is like, there's no entry point to this tool. It's just, you just need to have like a brain and like be able to type. And that's what's scary. But it is a tool in the sense that if somebody playing, and it could be like 9-year-olds playing like D&D, say, and we reach this thing and the treasure is like this crystal skull, and you go, crystal skull, and then you see it there, and you're like, oh fuck, that looks good. That looks good. That's a good ass crystal skull. Like I can see it. I can like understand what that treasure that I was going for. You know, the role of the illustrator. That was our role. But now, you know, it's going to be gone, and it's fine. Like, I know that I'm rushing a little bit saying it's fine, but it's like so many roles in our history have disappeared. So many have disappeared. There's no engravers anymore. There's not one single engraver. You know, wood engravings. Who does wood engravings anymore? So maybe one town in Japan does like traditional ukiyo-e. That's it. So, so there are roles that die. There are roles that, you know, happen to be born also in the art world. But the fact that, like, you know, these kids could now like see things that they at some point had to imagine, it's kind of cool to me, you know. Or maybe somebody's writing their first book and they don't have money to pay for an illustrator. They just don't. And maybe it's an amazing book, but they wanted to have illustrations. Maybe they can make illustrations for that book. They're not artists, but maybe they now have a tool that can aid them in making illustrations for their book. Maybe schools start using it. Like I gave you an example of understanding what a Rembrandt is. And maybe kids at some point when, you know, 3D printers are more ubiquitous and you know, they can log in and they can say like, okay, you have to paint, you have to research 17th century, you know, Dutch painting, but we want you to bring, like, you're going to bring a painting from 17th century, you know, Holland to us. And kids are like, oh my God, I can do like a Vermeer of a Frans Hals or a Rembrandt, and they can, you know, they can make their Rembrandt. And it sounds crazy, but they can. Like, these are ways that, yes, the other thing, terrible. The other thing, probable, because, you know, the world is kind of like, you're using a current model of big corporations, people doing anything for billions of dollars, infringing on rights. You're just saying, hey, we are here. We're probably going to go there. Like, there's nothing that kind of changes the path that we're in. But I would say, sure, but schools still exist. Independent thought still exists. Critical thought still exists. Sure, the world, like humanity, can be sheeply. Sure. Like consuming things just means like there is like mass consumption. That exists because we consume massive amounts of the same thing. Like we can be shaped. Sure. Totally get it. But for every big studio, you know, making things, there's always somebody in a garage saying, you know what? I'm going to spend fucking 7 years doing this stop motion animation. I'm just going to do it. And it doesn't make sense because art has never made sense. It's never been efficient at its core. Never. It doesn't matter when you can go back ages. It was always slow. It was always painful. It was always expensive. Always. So my idea, and maybe I differ somewhat from yours, but I totally understand why you pose like a bit of a darker future. But my idea is that there's good in this here. There's good. Like, for sure there's good. When all these things combine, when VR combines, 3D printing combines, AI, whatever AI means, like learning, upsampling, just, you know, when you put that in the hands of people that just want to share things, what if you print, you know, the Mona Lisa and you take it to towns where kids, the expectation of them traveling to the Louvre is zero. Nobody has ever in that town ever gone to a museum, has never gone to look at paintings, will never be educated, doesn't have money. And I know I'm sounding like, no, there's thousands of towns like that in this world. You know, what if you take that and you say, hey, I brought you guys a painting. Like this painting that we did out of AI and we printed it, this is supposed to be like the most famous image of our, species. And they look at it and I'm like, oh my God, you brought the Mona Lisa to us. It's nuts. Like when I think of that, I'm like,
I think the kids might. Well, I think the kids might be like, "Wow, it's the real Mona Lisa."
Yeah.
You'd be like,
And
"No," but they'd be like, "Well,
and
what
then they
the?"
throw like yogurt on it, and
Yeah, there'd be
no,
something
no.
like
But
that.
so I just wanted to say, like, I understand, like, I totally get, like, why it's important to see, like, the grounded, the real, this world is messed up. Like, this world is money. Like, that's what matters. And I totally understand that this could turn into something like, no, they're just going to get to know you better, and they're going to tailor make experiences for you so you consume the shit out of everything. Sure, that's where we're at right now. That's just that is where we're at right now. But alongside that, you also have to argue that's where we're at. But we're making some really amazing, soulful, deep, interesting shit also. And that has never left us. And I don't think that ever will leave us. So there is a future also that I think that even if this is inevitable, it's not that bad. So how do you see that? How do you balance that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a lot to balance, but all right. Let me try to retread here a little bit. So all of the beautiful things about it, right? Everything that's on the table there, with allowing any child to have professional level illustration for their D&D game, anything like that, all of the utopian stuff that I'm into, right? I don't see, it's like, is there some reason that can't happen with the opt-in, right? Is there some reason that can't happen? It feels like there's a resistance, or there's like an assumption buried deep down where they're like, when you bring that up, people are like, yeah, well, it could, but it won't be as good. And it's like, all right, well, if you're saying that, that's why I'm saying pay my fucking friends,
right,
because they're the ones who made it good, right? So what's the argument that for some reason your niece must have the version of the crystal skull for her D&D game that is influenced by Gregor Rakowski and not the one that is influenced by all of classical antiquity? Like, why can't it work with the Creative Commons version, the public domain version? So to all of that, to all of the utopian stuff, I want to be very careful to always remind people, like, there's a opt-in, opt-out, Creative Commons open domain version that should ostensibly be able to do the same stuff. And if you're worried it won't do it as well, it sure sounds like you should compensate artists then, right? Or you should go, or as a company, you should go shoot your own images, right? Go like hire photographers to shoot 1 billion photos of the earthly landscape, which is public domain. But you're just too lazy, or you don't want to spend the money. So you're just like, well, let's take the work of every other photographer. There's a big thing here where it's like, at every instance where we would imagine, was there some possible other way to acquire these images? It is on the tip of the tongue. Reach out to the artists and license their image. You want landscapes to train it? Go pay for time. You're a company with $100 million, right? Would it kill you to go pay a photographer to go shoot the photos for you? They're yours. Then you can do whatever you want with them, and you can make the product that then you can make the landscape AI that companies can use, and it's all commercially above board and all that. On all of those points, it's always, that's what's so galling about it. It's always easy to imagine what would be the right way to do it. And they do it the wrong way over and over and over again. So I want to put some big points on that, but like it's a question of quality almost, because at our guts we already know art is democratized, right? Like it takes paper and pencil, right? There's a lot of other things about art, like success, monetary gain, reputation. There's a lot of other things added onto it that we might say, aren't democratized, right? We might say it's easier to get reputation if you're a man rather than a woman. We might say that it's easier for people to take you seriously if you're already rich or if you're white or something like that. There's all sorts of problems like that in it. But art making itself, paper and pencil, honestly, a piece of charcoal from the fire and a bare wall will do, right? Like the notion that it's not democratized, I take issue with. It is democratized. It's the most radically like available out there thing, right? And these days you can even learn to draw for free and everything like that. There's so much stuff on YouTube. So I think we have to be very careful to be clear, I think, that what we're hoping is to democratize high quality art. And I would argue that we don't have an entitlement to high quality art. That's a very flimsy, subjective thing, right? And before this happened, that is to say, before these AIs hit the scene, I don't think most people had any reasonable sense of entitlement to high quality art. It's just like now that the tool got shot out there, they're like, oh, well, suddenly I am. Suddenly, fuck you. It does have to be high quality art. And I think you will feel that as myself and others try to apply pressure, saying opt in, opt out, Creative Commons, public domain. There'll be this pressure where they're like, no, but it's got to be really good. It's got to be really good. And for that, I need a Nicolas Uribe in there. You know, that helps make it really good. So I just want to put big dog ears on all that. But to go back to the core question, now that I got all those disclaimers out of the way, right? If there's really no way to put it back in the bottle, right? Which again, I've explained that I take issue with that too, that we're dealing with it like it's actually a genie, that it really isn't. Again, we're the assholes. You can apply pressure to human beings. You can talk to meatbags, and there is things that you can do. But let's say it can go on forever, right? Even if it's inevitable, it is valuable to slow it down, because the inevitability that we're talking about is an achievement or a success or a milestone, again, for a non-sentient machine. But the benefits of slowing it down, of not tearing families apart, of not making people go through the suffering of job hunts, of not immediately dumping on everybody the existential question of, well, why are we here if creativity is done by machines? Those benefits of slowing it down are all benefited. Human beings experience those benefits. Conscious beings experience those benefits. They will get the benefits of that. There is an objective difference, I think, to having things happen suddenly and toss you into turmoil, and having things happen over a longer time scale where you can integrate things, work with things, talk with people about things, make plans. It takes humans time to execute on plans, right? So there is a benefit because this way even well-meaning people can see what is coming, and they say, all right, well, I've got some bit more time, and there's regulations and things but I already can read the writing on the wall, and I'm going to move, right? And I'm going to change. Now, so I would argue that there is a benefit to slowing things down. And I would argue that the adversary against that argument doesn't exist. Like I said, the robot doesn't have any entitlement to anything. We're not here to protect them. So again, I'm going back to the humanist angle, right? As far as I know, we're the only sentient beings around, right? Not sentient, conscious beings with
whatever we define as consciousness. Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to get into the animal debate, but I'm saying that in terms of, is there anything in the machines? Most people would agree there's nothing there, right? So we have to prioritize what's good for us here. We have to prioritize what's good for conscious beings. If we want to just say, okay, but what if, then if we're imagining it running forever, right? I'm right there with you. I think it would basically completely transform civilization. And I think that those problems, that's almost like a grab your neighbor by the neck and be like, we need to talk about this. Like that is such a an unbelievable scale of change that even discussions like this pale in comparison. Discussions about litigation and things like that. But the idea of that that all the people on the earth have to look at a technology and we all agree that's what's important here. We all agree that it completely undermines um, all of the things that we would have normally said were meaning making or something like that, right? Like to be creative or to do good work or to be intelligent for its own sake or something like that. If we all agreed that it was going to undo all of that, I think we would need to go through some sort of, a spiritual revolution doesn't even seem to do it. A human revolution doesn't even seem to do it. It would require some sort of ground floor reckoning with whether it means anything or not to be conscious. And I think, as you've heard from my arguments, I think it does, right? I think it means a lot. I think it's a miracle that there's something it's like to be a person, right? Or a dog or something like that. And if we're going to, we need to be ready to reckon with that if we're going to realistically let a machine take everything else. And my worry here is that when I'm talking to you, I'm in a lucky position because you have thought about these things and you like talking about the far out, the max consciousness, things like that. But when I look left and right of me and my family, for example, right? Like there's no one in my family who, if I start talking to them like this about this stuff, they're like,
lock him up, crazy.
Exactly. They don't want to have it. It's like, if we were all on the same page, there might be some hope. And there is always hope. But I mean, it'd be more likely that we'd be ready to be like, let's talk UBI, everything for everyone forever, right? But can you imagine floating that in the current society? I mean, it's amazing the strides that it's made so far, but for the most part, I mean, the open ridicule is insane. I mean, it's just completely laughed out of discussion. And if I had more faith that the people in power, and this is all me trying to hold people in power accountable and to try to help with this, right? If I had more faith that they would be open to radical conversations like that, which honestly, it's like we're having them sober, but this is how people talk on mushroom trips, right? So if I thought they were open to conversations like that at this time, I would sleep better at night. I sleep fine for the record, but I would be much more comfortable with just, I don't know, it would help me a bit on the idea of just letting it run roughshod over everything. But I don't feel comfortable. I don't think people would handle it well. And I don't think the people that we would hope would help us out would actually be very inclined to help us out based on what I'm seeing out there. So time is valuable here. Extremely valuable because there's, like you said, it's not just this conversation. We have to talk about a lot of stuff. It's going to affect politics. It's going to affect what you can know is true or not. It's going to affect our understanding of ourself, existential crises, everything. So we need time to have those conversations. And the existential dread is real because since this stuff has hit the scene, I'm getting messages every day from people telling me art was my dream and I'm quitting.
Right. There's a dark future for a lot of people. I've got friends, acquaintances, illustrators, character designers, mostly. I think character designers are shook. Like, it's like they see it and it's like, yeah, that thing can replace me probably. That thing, give it a couple of years at the speed it's going, it can replace me. Or like you said, at the speed, people financing it want it to be going, which if it does well, you can only, think that it's going to go faster. Then, yeah, maybe that thing just needs like a one in-house artist to do tweaks on shit, and that's it. And that's it. They're gonna get so close. I don't know if companies do you know of studios that are just openly saying like, yeah, we're searching for this type of art and we're using it? Is it, are we at that point? I don't think we are. And usually, I mean, you're far more familiar with this than I am, but I love video games, but I know, it takes time. It's not like this is something that we're going to see the effect of it like immediately. These are, projects that are years in the making. But is there an openness from the studios to say, oh, we'd be willing to use this?
I
Or is it like a wait and see game? Like, we're not saying anything right now, but we're going to wait. And if at some point it starts to make sense.
the difficulty is that studios are under no obligation to discuss how they make
Right.
their things, and everybody working for them is under NDA.
Right.
So they're not supposed to talk about how things are made. Now, when everything's mushy and nice and everyone's drawing over there, everyone's happy to say it. But if things get weird, they don't have to say it, and they're not supposed to at a certain level. So that's very complicated. And just speaking from my personal position, I'm in that world. I have friends in that world. I have a network in that world. And recently with with the AI video that I put out, just have to be very careful about what I say. But like, yeah, people get in contact. People send messages, and I simply cannot talk about that. It's not my place to tell their stories. So I'm not going to, but I just want to make clear for people that this is really, it's out there. and things are happening, and I hope that if the professionals that are listening, you know, we want your voice, like share, tell your stories. So,
And I'd also be interested in, and we're kind of nearing an end, and I've kind of, tried to read some of the discussion that's been going on, like off in the comment section.
yeah.
Oh, that's like, if our exchange is kind of complicated, oh, there's complexity in
Yeah.
there. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's always, so I apologize if we haven't like entertained, I guess, or if we haven't considered some of the comments. It's not a matter of like not considering it. It's like, to give shape to this argument is so weird and so difficult. So
Yeah.
difficult. So if
So
anything,
nuanced.
that's kind of on me, because I know that if we just spread out thin, we're just gonna, still think that we didn't reach like a solid moment. And I think that that's what you're advocating for, Stephen. That it's like, there are things that we can do. We
Yes.
just need like a law firm that says, you know what, I want to take on this case, maybe for publicity. Who cares? But I want to take on this, and I want to see, maybe it's Greg's work, maybe it's Dave's work, Dave McKean. I think Dave McKean is like, it's just uncanny how some of those things really feel. And I don't know if you listened to the podcast like interview that where he was talking about AI, but
Yes.
but
I listened to one of them. Was it the one that he was having with two other artists?
No. This is just one guy. I forget what the maybe some people in the chat can remind
I think
me.
I listened to a different one.
This one's like really cool, because at the end he says, you know what, all of this is happening, but maybe the question that we have to ask is why? Like, why do we want this? Why do we want to risk, just music not existing and visual stimulus not existing and things that can make buildings and, and that's why are we seeking this? And I thought that was really interesting. And again, I have this side of me that's like chaos. That there is like a pull. I don't think, in my, artistic, sensible, mindset, my being, I'm just like a very, one path sort of person. I like to like, I want to see all the futures. Like, I want to see everything that is in front of me. But I was going to say that, and I apologize to chat if this, if we've kind of handled the conversation just in the hopes of giving it some structure. And I would say, and maybe to conclude, because maybe this is too much AI for a conversation for some people, but I would say that it seems like we have, and I'm going to say we, hoping that there is like this traditional sort of guild union of artists at some point, but I don't know how plausible is that. But we as artists that encompass not only visual artists, but musicians, dancers, performers, we come to realize that, okay, it's time to protect what we do. And all we need is one legal battle that it's like, this is, they found like that little break, and they realized, oh my God, this is dirty inside. Like, this is horribly dirty inside. And when they find it, or hopefully if they find it, we can say, there are places that are going to harbor us and nourish us and protect us. And we're going to be in like a little shielded space. It's going to be like, hey, if you want to hire us, if you want to use my image to like feed into something or to print somewhere, well, print is dead. But, if you want to socialize it somewhere, you need to go through me. You need to compensate me. And that's great. Maybe that's the start. And we just take the legs out of this thing, and it just begins to move at a pace that we can deal with, that we as human beings can say, okay, this is it. I think that that's something that could be done, and it could be like, I don't know, it'd be fantastic to hear this trial. Love to be, because it's like fair use, but who knows how to define fair use? I think fair use is just like useless, to be honest. That law is like the most, mutable thing and interpretable thing that has ever been written, because nobody had the guts, because we know that it's like, under fair use, it's like the underlying question is like, what is art? Like, where does intent lie in? How to quantify intent? And that's like, oh my God. I think, it's, I know it when I see it, when the very famous quote about pornography, it's like judges don't want to touch that. Like, they're like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't want to be the person that defines if this was art or if this was theft. I don't want to quantify how much of the image they used. I don't know I don't know what it means. Like, imagine a judge saying like, what do you mean like recontextualize something? Like, what is in art speak? What does that mean to like common people, so that we can explain it? So I think if anything, that law has to change, because it has to start to understand, what future. I don't even know, because this thing can change so much from month to month that I don't know if you change it now, it's going to be a law that makes sense a year from now or 2 years from now. So I don't know. I don't understand how we fight that, but I do think that when the rules change, and I think there's a lot of rules that are changing, the laws have to change. They have to. They have to try at least to keep up, at least. So I think that that's one way, which is I find very tough, though. But I hope maybe, if there's a law firm there, like a copyright law firm that's like, hey, do you want to be famous? Let's go for it. Let's take these people down. Like, let's go for it. I fucking love that thing. I fucking love it.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, I fucking love it. And
Come
they would
on,
get
law
so
firm,
much.
give it a shot.
And they would get so much publicity. So much publicity. It's like the first, I loved it because Dave McKean did a book, and he's like, this is the first book that's ever been printed solely on AI, images. And he did like a short run, and I got one of those books because I was like, I want to have this thing that's like a fossil. I want this thing that it's like, I hope that eventually nothing like that exists, just to know that, this was, maybe my kids can tell, their grandchildren, it's like, oh no, this was a thing at one point, like, a thing did this, like this thing. And the other, like, what I do think, and I it's a heavy subject matter, but I do think that we can come to a point in the same way that when they cloned, dall-e, is it the sheep in like mid-90s?
dall-e, like DOLLY, right? We're not talking about dall-e.
No. Let's not mix. Let's not fuck things up even more.
Yeah.
But when they cloned that sheep, the world came together, and it's like, And I'm sure people were like, oh my God, there's so much money in like, um, uh, I need a heart replacement bank, and we're just gonna have embryos there to give people, the organs that they need. I'm sure a lot of people immediately thought, dude, there's money in there. There's a lot of money in there. And they can say, no, but we're doing it to save people. This is great. If you have cancer, if you're looking for a donor, no, we got you covered. You got your clone embryo here. We can give you whatever organ you need. We can give you anything you need. Like,
Yeah.
there is an argument there that was supposed to be, hey, this could save us. This could save kids that are suffering from leukemia. This could, there is a place there to have that argument. And yet, in something that doesn't seem to be true to our nature, we were like, oh no, this is fucking scary. This is fucking really scary. This could turn into the end of days if we keep doing this. And the world, even though, for example, in the US, there's no federal law, they are wise enough to say, oh, we're going to cut the finance from anything that wants to deal with cloning. They won't say cloning, but they'll say, oh, we're going to cut the finance. If there's no money for this, nobody's going to do it. If we say you can't have, nobody can promote this, nobody can push money into this, then it doesn't happen. And that's easy. But what's scary is that there's no real federal law saying cloning is illegal, which is mind-boggling. But I do think that as a planet, because it's not like there's a small town in Bulgaria that's like, oh no, we clone here. Oh yeah, no, fuck that, we clone. It's like, no. We were able to say, this is wrong. This is really wrong. We don't want to head down this way. And it's one of those things that's like, you know what is best for us? To just close that door and throw the key. Don't look back, dude. Don't, just keep moving forward. Nothing to see here. Just go forward. I think that we have those two, we can either play the waiting game until we have this existential crisis and we realize we fucked up, but we can turn this off. We can try to pull the switch and we can turn it off. Or we can say, and this is, I don't have friends that are copyright. Well, I actually do know one copyright lawyer. But, I would say, go for it. Fucking try to hit a home run, dude. Go up and fucking swing for the fences, because that's a cool conversation. I only love it because I'm let's get in there. Let's fucking get in there. And let's see how that sausage is done, because it looks like a fucking horrendous sausage. But let's see it. Yeah, let's see it. Yeah. Let's see it. And
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a there. Let's do it. If they really, God damn it, if they really think it's okay and they earned it, well, earn it. Let's do it. Let's really tear it apart and look inside this thing and pop the hood, and let's figure this out before untold damage is done. And we're out here. Artists are out here. Yep. Attention is high. Yes. We're very focused on this. Any privilege, if that's, a legal professional wants to drop me an email, my email is out there. I'd be happy to hear from you.
Hit while the iron is hot. I think that's right now. There's a lot of eyes on this. Take on it. I honestly think Greg is a perfect example. Dave McKean is a perfect example. I'm sure they'd be fine. Both of them would be fine. Let's look under the hood. Let's see how this thing works.
Yeah, it's a very nuanced subject. It's so complicated. The idea that we should, any of the dismissive, let me just, to send a public service announcement out there to artists in the chat who are going to wade into these things and these conversations and talk about it in comments and Twitter and stuff like that. The comments that are dismissive about it, that are you're already wrong, don't worry about it. Don't fight it. Stop resisting. It's just going to win. This is the future, blah, blah, blah. All of that downward oppressive pressure, right? Take it from me. Just don't listen to that. What is that an argument? Asking you to just quit yesterday? That's not an argument. That's not anything. There's nothing there. I assure you, there's a there. There is something that needs to be investigated, that needs to be looked at by professionals. And I think that, sometimes when we're in these conversations and, we're very bohemian guys, we forget culture is built on court cases. We live in a world that is, there's a lot of things going into the nature of our culture. And one of those is what has happened in court and what is legal and what isn't. And you can't predict, anyone who thinks they're certain what's going to happen if you go into court with this stuff is wrong.
Yeah.
You can't be certain about it. So just like has always happened in court, we've all seen cases go into courts and we're all like, well, we know how that's going to go. And it goes the complete other way, right? Like we should do it. It's important enough. It's big enough that we should actually have a real conversation with a capital C, conversation between artists, conversation on a meta level, conversation between all human beings and courts and actual litigation and regulation. And we should figure this thing out. And all of the difficult questions that arise there should be arisen. The oppressive pressure, the feeling that we should dismiss this is asking for all of these questions to not be asked. And none of us, who wants that? Why would you want that? So when you encounter that vibe, that mood, I would say, don't worry about it. Keep going. Keep asking questions. Keep looking into this stuff because it's real. There's something there to be investigated. And I don't know, the people who want to dismiss it, I can imagine why, but
yeah. And I would say, just to finish this off, I would say that I don't know how nuanced our conversation was, but we were able to maintain like 2 hours of talking about this without, I may have some different views on this because I'm pulled through all different directions on this. I really am. I really, really am. But I'm not afraid to admit it to you because I think we can have a conversation and I can listen to you. I can learn from you. I actually I'm very grateful for your video because I'm more on the passionate side, and I'm super sensible artist, I would say, and I tend to, when I let myself go, I tend to start dealing with highly abstracts, I feel, and the reality is that we need people like you that kind of ground people and say, no, look, there's these 40 artists here that were cut, from their studio. Because that's
so funny because no one has ever accused me of being a grounding element ever in my life. I'm out there. I know, but it's just like on this one thing, I was like, wait, there's a problem.
Know,
like right away, I lowered down.
But you are willing to, let's say you were willing to pick up those like stones and say like, oh, look what's underneath here. Like, let's look at this. Like, we can have that conversation, but let's look at this first. Like, let's check this out first. And it's like, hey, I'm okay having all this existential crisis conversation, but can we first deal with like this very real world matter, which is like, how are these things like feeding themselves? Like, it's not this simple. It's not as simple as like, hey, it's Google. Like, that's kind of like in my most open of days, I'm like, fuck this, like early internet days. It's like anything goes. Like, it's Google. Images are out there. Go nuts. Like, go nuts. I have that side of me. I really do. Yeah. I have to accept it as an artist. But now I'm also realizing, okay, but it's not a game. Like, this is one of those things that we could go, there's a moment here that we could go into two vastly like different directions.
Yeah.
And it's not just an impact about, okay, jobs were lost or okay, now this animation is like, oh, look, the first AI created animation. It's like, no, like our understanding of what makes us human is like gone. It's like we have to redefine it. We have to like go to factory setting and like redefine who we are. Like, it could be that dense. So I'm glad that you bring up things because I think out of conversations, out of people not just saying, because I am on the robot side and I'm on the guy with a paintbrush side. Like, I'm the fucking idiot that grabs a paintbrush every single day and has done the same thing for the last 27 years. And I'm so happy and fulfilled with my life with a stupid ass paintbrush and painting right now on a piece of paper. Like, I'm that dude. So
Yeah.
for me, even for me, that, I cannot stop speaking about the wonders that it is to like fucking make something, to sit down and work through something and make something and battle through it and look at it and try to converse with it and grow with it. I'm the sort of person that goes to fucking Midjourney and goes like, oh fuck, that's good. I'm like, oh God, why is this good? Like, what are you doing to me?
Same.
This is not right.
That's why I take it seriously.
Right.
I wouldn't be taking it seriously if I thought they sucked. I take it
oh yeah,
seriously.
it's horrible. Who cares? Yeah.
I started taking it seriously years and years ago. I remember when I first saw Deep Dream, Google's Deep Dream, where it was making
oh, horrible. Right. The like
they were
nightmarish shit.
Yeah. Really crazy stuff. But
Yeah.
I think I remember actually where I was when I saw my first one.
Wow.
And I remember looking at it and like clicking pieces together in my head. And I was like, I see where this goes.
Yeah.
Like I right away remember having like a weird feeling in my guts. So I care because I take them seriously. And I do think they're good. And it's like we mentioned before, like not wanting to shun people and things like that. It's like I totally understand the desire to use them. Like I said, like I love new technology and things like that. And an ethical model, I think it, like I said, I don't have the picture of an ethical model. So whatever that winds up being, if I look at it and I agree, that's totally ethical. I'm in. I want to try it. I have a lot of things I want to poke around with something like that. But it's just, we need to, as much as I tend to have my head up in the clouds, and I feel very much like you about art, right? And I'm about as fulfilled as I get sitting at my desk making my pictures. So but in spite of that, there must be this practical conversation about what's actually happening here. And unfortunately, artists are not just at their desk and at the easel. We are people in the world, and we do have intellectual property, and I believe we have rights just like other people do. And this is a discussion that needs to be borne out and that we need to pan out. So I hope people pay attention to it. I hope people get educated about it. There's more resources coming out every day. More resources will be coming out, and it is inevitable that organizations are going to come out and that movements are going to come out. So please, everyone, keep your eye on all of this stuff. Have these conversations. Like Nicolas said, I mean, these conversations can be perfectly amenable. We're supposed to be able to talk about these things calmly, cogently, and be kind to each other. Like I said in my video, now this is a part that people want to debate, right? So I have to put up my hands here and just say this is completely subjective, and I know people are debating other things, but I'm always going to be honest when I have these conversations, right? So the argument about is AI art, I'm like, I don't care. I'm happy to say it's art. The idea of labeling something as art being relevant here is really far away. It doesn't very much intersect with the conversation. It's like, and the question is not just on the end user, right? You've got to remember that it's likely when you're talking about people with this in comments or in a conversation, you're addressing, in most situations, you're going to be addressing the end user, right? You're not addressing the company. I have very little against any end user of these systems. This ain't my first rodeo. I know most people don't know what's happening. I know most people don't understand what's under the hood. And I know that they're incentivized to want to use these things, and they're fascinating. And the vibe that's out in the culture right now is just that it's fine. It may be weird, but there's nothing we can do about it. So of course, people are going to use about it. So I have no problem with any individual end user. I have no interest in shunning them, right? And I totally understand the deep-seated human desire to want to express yourself in whatever way possible. Absolutely. But the conversation is not just about what end users do. It's about the distributive models. It's about the companies that are putting them out, how they're gathering their data, what's in the data, the privacy concerns, the copyright concerns, the IP concerns, what legal systems are inuring them from challenges on the way that they are collecting those things. Those are questions too. It's not just about end users. I really have very little to say about end users. I see how it's clear to me that the fair use question, there's a fair use question to be had at the end user end, but there's a separate fair use question to be had at the model's end when it trains on the data sets. So that is about the most interesting part of it. But for individuals, it's not really the grounds of the conversation. I think right now the grounds of the conversation is systemic. I think that it's a systemic conversation. And that's where I'm focusing my energies.
Nice. Stephen, thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you, Nicolas.
So last thing I would say is, people, if this is a little out of context, I think Stephen can do a wonderful job at like helping you understand ground up, because I think you were very cogent when you had your argument, that you displayed in your video. So click on the link. I think that's the beginning of the education that we all need, in this. And we do need that little bit of education, because in order to have, conversations that don't end up in one team thinks they're right and the other thing and the other team thinks they're right, and there's nothing we're going to be able to do about the polarization there. I think we just, we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand what's going on. And yeah, if there's nothing to hide, I'm the sort of person is like, dude, poke. If there's nothing to hide, these companies can open up everything and say, hey, look, this is how our model works. Mm-hmm. If they're scared shitless, it's because they're doing something. You immediately know they're doing something that's not right. So all we have to all we have to gain from that is good things. When we decide to say, hey, this needs to be like a truly open conversation. And I am up for learning about, if somebody wants to go against that like giant, David and Goliath style, take it down. I am up for that drama. I want to see that. I really want to see that, because I think we all win in the end. Like, but if we get into like, crap conversations about this, we lose, they win. Like this is, it won't take us anywhere.
That's distraction.
Point.
Crap conversations.
It's going to be noise. It's going to be noise. So, Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicolas.
And for everyone that was like, we had a crazy active, a bunch of people here on chat.
Yeah. People really care about this.
Hell yeah.
People talk the whole time on chat when you're talking about this.
This is not.
People
this
really
is.
Care.
I think deep down we know this is something. There is something here. It's something, and it's something different. It's not. Yeah. It's not as the easy conversation that we can have of copyright and fair use. I mean, as complex as that is, this is worse. This is even.
It's
deeper.
A whole new level.
Hell yeah.
A whole new level.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. So it was awesome to meet you, because we hadn't met before.
This is great,
dude. Stephen, for everyone, parents, Colombian, so represent.
Absolutely. I'll drop by next time I'm down in Bogota.
Hell yeah, dude. Of course.
We'll have some fun.
Hell yeah, of course. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for hanging out. For us, for our painted lives. We'll see you tomorrow. We're probably going to live streaming some painting. But thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.